Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, distinguished guests, and folks of all stripes, put your hands together for the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. Houston, we have Paul Salazar Jr.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast, your Houston sports podcast for diehard Houston sports fans from a diehard Houston sports fan. I'm Paul Salazar Jr., your favorite diehard Astros fan podcaster. I already have hiccups. That's great. I'm a hiccup collector, a digital content creator, a writer, actor, and creative multi-hyphenate. Of course, I'm a Houston native, and I have the receipts to prove it. I can finally admit it. I run the kolache factory. Like a bread and stuffing minded Willy Wonka. I have a whole magical place there in Houston. I've spent the last decade or so as a comedy writer in Los Angeles, and now, well, I'm podcasting. That's what happens once you hit 10 years out here. You wake up one day and just start calling the movie industry just the industry, and they give you a podcast. Welcome to said podcast. This is what my brother calls the Paul Broadpod Ball Blog. Hey, brother, check out spacecadetsports.substack.com for the full blog experience, or the full blog experience, depending on how you interpret my pronunciation of that word. You know, I started Space Cadet Sports as a passion project because most media is infuriating as a die-hard long-term fan of the Houston Astros. Here, we try not to be doom and gloom Astros fans, or worse, the national media haters. We love our team and root for them, but we also want to discuss the ins and outs of the team without too much homerism. Keyword, we try. We try to be reasonable and not too hot-takey or reactionary, but I mean, we all have emotions, folks. It's how it goes. We are recording this transmission here in sunny Los Angeles, where I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and co-producer, the Roz to my Frasier. Carla, the dog, is here with me. She may get on mic from time to time. Welcome back to the podcast. People who've heard it before, you know she's got the hot takes on this podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. On this episode, we are going to get back into our spring training preview, where we will be talking about catchers and relief pitchers here today. We're going to break down the roster with Space Cadet. Today we have catchers and relief pitchers. If you are also new to the podcast, join me and return listeners in wishing a good day, mate, to our Australian listeners. Let me try that tongue twister again. Our Australian listeners. Good Lord, Paul. You know, we have we when we started our podcast last year, it rocketed up the charts in Australia. We are outside of the top 100 in baseball podcasts in Australia, so we're trying to crank into that top 100. If you are an Australian, thank you for listening. If you know Australians, tell them to listen to this podcast. Or if you just know an Astros fan or a Houston fan, an H-Town hustler, an H-Town repper, a diehard like me, let them know we are out here. But let's get to this podcast today, folks. We are talking about catchers and relief pitchers. Carla has officially walked into the studio after eating her dinner here. So we have everyone here. We're ready to talk about catchers and relief pitchers. We have a lot of things to talk about in this podcast, so I'm going to, not talk quicker than I normally do. I don't think I can talk much quicker than I do. I feel sorry for the poor souls who listen to this on 2x speed. I can't imagine how quickly I talk then, but we will have to get through a lot of information in this podcast, so I will be moving fairly quickly here. So let's get to the catchers. Let's get to it. For the catchers that the Astros are bringing to spring training, obviously we have the regulars. We have Yainer Diaz, of course, who is factored in to be the everyday catcher, or the number one catcher on the depth chart for sure for our Houston Astros. There's no other way around it. Then backup catcher Victor Caratini, of course, is being brought to spring training, and we have Cesar Salazar, who he's kind of been the third catcher for the last couple of seasons here. Slotting in right there behind Victor Caratini as a catcher. And then we have Cooper Hummel, as well. Moving on to our non-roster invitees, we have Joe Hudson, Miguel Palma, and Colin Price. So let's kind of get to it here. Let's kind of look at this, look at some stats, look at how we think about this. This is one of the easiest breakdowns positionally for the Houston Astros, not only because it is only one position, but because we know Yanner's starting. We know Yanner's going to be catching 4 of the 5 starting pitchers, most likely. Victor Caratini will be paired up with the starter, I'm sure, to give Yanner a break when he needs it. But there's no disputing. There's nothing that anyone can say to make anyone think differently than Yanner Diaz is the starting catcher. Victor Caratini is the backup. He's also going to be our number 1 pinch hitter. The way he executed last season as a pinch hitter, and the way Joe Espada, Astros manager Joe Espada, was very quick to pull players out for Caratini. Caratini is most likely going to still see a lot of time for the Houston Astros. We could talk about Bregman a little later and how he factors into the team. Last week we talked about infielders, which was a tough thing to do with potential Bregman re-signing on the horizon. We don't feel as optimistic about that re-signing happening, as we did last week. Definitely not as optimistic as 2 weeks ago. But, without Alex Bregman on the squad, Victor Caratini can definitely see more DH spots this season because there won't be an infielder logjam. But we'll talk more about Bregman a little later, trying to talk about our catchers here. Carla's trying to get all the ear scratches right now. And of course, with Victor Caratini being your backup catcher, you're going to have Cesar Salazar. His name isn't Caesar. Don't call him Caesar because he isn't a salad. He's a Salazar. Okay, he's Cesar. So get it right, folks. Get that pronunciation right. I know I mispronounce almost every player's name, but it isn't Caesar. It's Cesar. But Cesar, if we're looking at his stats from 2024, he played 12 games. He had a 320 average with a 387 OPB on base percentage, and he had a 400 slugging with a 343 WOBA and a 126 weighted runs created WRC plus, factoring into a .4 WAR in 12 games. So Cesar Salazar was extremely efficient last season. Cesar Salazar looks to be a great third catcher on a roster. He looks major league ready. I don't think this average and these numbers are that sustainable. When you look at fan graphs here, which is what I've been doing what I've been using for a lot of my projections, looking at these things. As to how I think the depth chart will kind of shake out. Use a lot of fan graphs, use a lot of baseball savant. But I'm reading off of fan graphs projections here. They project, Cesar Salazar is not going to factor into the Astros too frequently this upcoming season. They think he'll only play about 5 games with a 216 average, 288 WOBA, and an 88 WRC plus. So I think, Cesar Salazar, mi primo, we're definitely rooting him on. We think that he will be the third catcher on the roster, but how much playing time he actually gets will probably be very minimal, barring an injury to Yanner Diaz or Victor Caratini. Victor Caratini, he, in the Fangraph projections, he's looking to factor in to play about 52 games, they're saying, with double checking that is the right stat line there. Yeah, 52 games, with a 302 Woba in a 98 WRC plus, dropping his WRC plus down from last season, which was above average at 113. So weighted runs created plus, 100 is like the median there when you're looking at this stats. For people that aren't too familiar with it, I apologize if I'm preaching to the choir for you stat nerds out there. But we have a variety of people that listen to the podcast, from casuals to really intense stat nerds. So we're looking at that 100 mark being kind of league average for WRC plus. So it looks like he's taking a step back offensively this season. Maybe it's going to be because they factor in Yanner getting a lot more playing time. When we're looking at Yanner's projected stats from Fangraphs, he is taking a step back in the number of games he's playing, but he's factoring in to hit more home runs. They're thinking his WOBAs and WRC plus is looking to hang around the same area. So it looks like they're thinking, Yainer Diaz might be hitting for some more power next season. He might start putting together all of the pieces of his game. When people were killing Dusty Baker for starting Martin Machete over Yainer Diaz, they kept pointing to Yanner's offensive stats. They kept pointing to Yanner's defensive metrics. Last season with Yanner's first full season as a catcher, you could see some of those numbers start to fade a little bit. He's still going to be a great catcher, but it takes time to learn how to do all of the things that you really have to do to be a catcher. I think he's going to start putting it together this season. So I'm excited about this catching group that we have here. I think they're solid. I think Victor Caratini and Cesar Salazar are great backup catchers. I think Cesar Salazar really was calling some good games there when he was playing with the major league team up with the Astros. So I'm excited about that. But let's look at some of these other names here very quickly. Let's look at Cooper Hummel, who is an outfielder for the Astros right now. He is trying to make his way onto the team essentially as a left fielder or a right fielder, I believe, right now. But he is also listed as a catcher. So for that reason, we have him listed here, and because he is on the roster, we kind of have him slotted up here as a fourth catcher. But I'm going to say most likely he won't catch at all for the Astros. I feel like some of this pitching prospect non-roster invitee, some of these pitching prospect non-roster invitees have a better chance of catching than Cooper Hummel does. But because he will most likely factor into being on the roster in some kind of way, I have him listed here as a fourth. Then these next three non-roster invitees, it's kind of hard to have them shake out. So take this with a grain of salt. I very much, I tell you that I'm a fan. I don't sit here and I try to say that I'm some kind of journalist or I'm some kind of intense stat person. I read all of the Astros blogs. I listen to a lot of the podcasts. I watch every single game. So this, take this with a grain of salt. I'm hoping that I have some kind of clarity here for you. But of course, I'm not trying to present myself as some kind of baseball scout. I'm reading what the scouts write. I am watching and learning scouting from the scouts. So we have Joe Hudson here, who is a non-roster invitee. He is a 34-year-old who's looking to catch on somewhere, a pun intended. We intend all of our puns very strongly on this podcast. I do not like cowards who don't intend their puns. Say it with your chest. I think Joe Hudson, while he's played for many organizations, he's kind of professional depth here. I think just in case something goes sideways, in case we have an injury, I feel like he's just professional depth. But he's there in the as a non-roster invitee this spring. We also have Miguel Palma, who is a 23-year-old. He's more of a DH. First base catcher combo, who is more of a backup catching prospect, who lacks catching experience. as there's a bit of a concern that his hitting will suffer from having to catch more frequently. Kind of like what I just said earlier, about Yainer Diaz. The more you catch, the more meetings you are about calling the game, the more catching duties you take on, the less time you have to be in the batting cages, the less time you have for preparation for that, the more you're juggling, and sometimes that changes your batting prowess just a little bit. It changes your approach to the plate because there's more time being dedicated to defense and other game management type things. This is what I was saying, about Martin Maldonado and Yainer Diaz. Sometimes a catching prospect, you really don't see how they are going to adapt to being an everyday catcher. So he's more of a hitter with that looks to slot in to be a backup catcher. He projects to be a third catcher on a 40-man roster with a shot to be a career backup is what the scouts are saying about Miguel Palma. So we're going to watch his career with great interest. We'll see how he develops. We also have Colin Price, who's a slightly older prospect, 25 years old. He's a glove first big frame defense prospect who has strong hands and has the skills to be an excellent pitch framer. So he's more of a defensive type prospect. He doesn't project to be a big offensive weapon, as he's been described by scouts as having, quote, fringe bat speed. So those are our catching prospects. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with some pitching. Welcome back, folks. Let's get into our relief pitchers. Obviously, the biggest change here is going to be the loss of Ryan Pressly. A lot of people have been talking about it. Obviously, we were talking about it the last couple of weeks. The Astros looking to move Ryan Pressly for financial flexibility, plus the potential of signing Alex Bregman. More on that later, but Ryan Pressly was traded to the Chicago Cubs for Juan Bello, pitching prospect, and like I said, essentially just to relieve the Astros for some salary cap room there, or some salary to make room in the salary cap is what I'm trying to say. Barely saying it, but I think without Ryan Pressly, a lot of fans. A lot of people might be a little worried. How do the Astros look without Ryan Pressly? And for the last season, and no disrespect to Ryan Pressly, I think he's a great player, and he's a World Series champion, and he's one of the best playoff closers, period. There's just no other way around it right now, especially in the time in which we live. He is the best closer that the playoffs have seen recently. So Ryan Pressly, is a legend. He's an Astros legend. So no disrespect by saying this, but I think Ryan Pressly was starting to get a little long in the tooth. He was starting to really, losing some speed on that fastball, losing some commands at times of some of his breaking pitches, and dealing with injuries. Plus, he was battling for his job back. He really didn't do anything to lose the closing job, except for just being a slightly lesser version of a closer compared to Josh Hader. I feel like that really... I don't think Ryan Pressly is the type of guy that he was pouting or doing all of these things that people were trying to accuse him of, like not just having a bad attitude. I mean, anyone would have a little bit of an attitude or an edge about it. I'm sure he made comments. I'm sure he, made it known that he wanted that job back. But, the fact of the matter is Ryan Pressly is getting older. Being a closing pitcher is a very volatile job. And he has been excelling so long that it just, it seemed like at some point Father Time was going to win, and he was going to have to start making more adjustments to start competing at this level. And it looked like he was needing some adjustments last season. So I'm not saying Ryan Presley's career is over or he's going to have a bad season in Chicago. Ryan Presley is a professional ball player. He is a competitor, and he is going to, I think a change of scenery is really good for him because he can start making adjustments that will hopefully be more beneficial to him in the long run. So I'm just saying the writing on the wall was Josh Hader was a closer. Ryan Presley was going to be the eighth inning guy. And Ryan Presley is getting a little older, and he was going into the last year of his contract. It was a tight situation. The Astros needed some cap flexibility, and they traded him. I really think that while it's a little scary, the Astros might have some arms to replace Ryan Presley. So let's look into that. Obviously, the closing pitcher on the Houston Astros is going to be Josh Hader. The people sipping that Haterade, he's a $98 million man. He came with a big price tag. People are going to be looking at him and dissecting his performance. I understand that. I still highly think that Josh Hader was a much better relief pitcher than Ryan Presley last season. So of course we're staying on the Haderade here. In 2024, Josh Hader had a 37.8 strikeout percentage. He had a 9% walk percentage and a 3.80 ERA with a 3.50 FIP. That was just slightly lower than a 1 WAR with 0.9 WAR. Josh Hader is him. Josh Hader has some issues sometimes. Sometimes he has little control issues. Sometimes, he last season ran into some issues giving up some home runs. I think all of these things, like I was saying, relief pitching is a very volatile job. I think it's hard to give relief pitchers a lot of money because it is so volatile. They'll sometimes have up and down seasons, and I think last season was a little bit of a weird down type season for Josh Hader. Moving to a new team, having no expectations, having Ryan Presley, only the greatest closer in in our decade, in playoff history, to breathing down your neck and keeping you honest about your job. I think this creates a better situation for the Astros bullpen, more definitive roles here. So Josh Hader, I really think Josh Hader, he's going to have an all-star season. He's going to really shine this year. I think, barring any kind of injury, Josh Hader should be fantastic. Moving on to the rest of these pitchers to see kind of how they shake out. Obviously we have Brian Abreu. Fans sometimes have been a little critical of Abreu. He sometimes has had some issues letting some people get on the base pads. He had some command issues. Gave up some home runs last season. But I really think Brian Abreu is a fantastic relief pitcher, and I think we're lucky to have him. So let's look at his stats. He's obviously going to be pitching the 8th inning in this upcoming season. In 2024, he played 78 games for 78 and 1/3 innings pitched. His strikeout percentage was in the 30s as well at 31.7%. His walk percentage was under 10 with 9.8 walk percentage. His ground ball rate was really high at 40.4 ground balls, and his ERA was a 3.10 ERA with a 3.49 FIP, and just being a shade under 1 WAR at 0.9 WAR is again. So folks, I really, you're looking at those stats, I think he's going to have another incredible year. If he can get plus 30 strikeout percentage and a sub 10 walk percentage, everything is going to be great for the Houston Astros. And Fangraphs projections have him at a 31 strikeout percentage and a 9.8 walk percentage for the 2025 year. So I am really investing into Brian Abreu. I think he, before we signed Josh Hader last year, I was even saying Abreu could potentially be the future closer. So, now he's he knows he has a setup role, so he's going to be fighting for that setup role. But for that seventh inning, we really have a mixed bag of pitchers that is going to be making that bridge to the eighth for our 1-2 punch of Abreu Hader. The biggest name on our roster right now, past those two names, is going to be Taylor Scott. Taylor Scott had a great breakout season last year. The South African native, really, really had an incredible year. He had such a good year. He really kind of got burned out. By the end of the season, he had to be rested. He wasn't really ready to go for the playoffs. He pitched so much, 68 and 2/3 of an inning to be precise. And I think he just kind of felt the wear and tear by the end of the year. I think this season they're going to manage him a little bit better if they can. He kind of was found money last year, and this year they're going to depend on him a lot more. So we're looking to see if Taylor Scott can replicate the season that he had last year. I think he can. I think it might not be quite as stellar as a feeling of a year that he had last year, but I think a lot of the teams are they have much more film on him, and their approach to him might change. So we'll see if Taylor Scott kind of makes those adjustments, the necessary adjustments to keep his relief pitching career a stellar one at this point. He really had a great year. So I'm hoping that Taylor Scott can be that seventh inning answer. But if he isn't, who else are we looking at? Who are the other names in the mix? I'm looking around here, and I'm looking at Caleb Ort. For sure, as being the next guy up on the roster, or perhaps even last year's rookie who had a really good year as a lefty, Brian King. Caleb Ort is a big guy, big flamethrower. I like his stuff. If he can keep his pitches down, his fastball, his fast pitches down, and he can kind of pound the zone, he could really be a seventh inning guy. I think I think he needs to kind of prove it a little more to get to that eighth inning. But, he really could. Caleb Ort, I think, could be a great player for the Houston Astros. Last season, Caleb Ort pitched 24 and 2/3 inning. He had a 28% strikeout rating, a 4.3 walk rating, which is absolutely fantastic. I know I'm saying he needs to, pound the zone. I'm not saying that because he's bad at it, because I think he can do it, but also, he had a 2.55 ERA. However, FIP, the field independent pitching, isn't too kind to Caleb Ort with a 5.23 FIP. So maybe Caleb Ort got a little lucky last season. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Caleb Ort. Yeah, making sure I didn't get that name wrong. So we will see. Maybe he looked a lot better than he should have, and that's why I am thinking he could be the answer. Brian King, on the other hand, Brian King, he as a rookie pitched 26 and 1/3 inning with a 29.4 strikeout percentage, really nice there. A 9.2 walk percentage, a 43.5 ground ball percentage, a 2.39 ERA, and a 2.71 FIP. So if Brian King can keep growing and keep developing as a left-handed pitcher, he really could be a great bullpen arm. I don't think he's just a left-handed type guy, that I think he could be a big factor for the Houston Astros going forward. But those are obviously huge question marks. Can Caleb Ort put it together? Can Brian King not have a sophomore slump and make the adjustments now that people kind of know who he is? And who else is in this bullpen? Who are these guys? Well, let's look at our actually, before we get to the middle, let's get to the middle relievers just a little bit here. Let's look at them here. Sorry, I'm like, what the heck is happening here? My notes are all over the place, folks. You'll have to forgive me. But yeah, let's look here at who I think is going to be our long relievers this year. Is going to be Sean Dubin and Forrest Whitley. Now, Forrest Whitley is most likely going to battle Caleb Ort, Brian King, for trying to get some of those middle relief innings, like in that Taylor Scott zone. I feel like he could be that. But Forrest Whitley also, has some starting pitching experience. So I feel like if Sean Dubin starts to struggle a little bit, Forrest Whitley could slot in to pick up a couple innings here and there because he has some experience with it. But it is Sean Dubin's job to lose right now. Sean Dubin and Brandon Bielak kind of, took the position of long reliever and split it last season. I think Sean Dubin is a good player. He just hasn't really quite figured it out last season. He had 23.7 strikeout percentage, a 12.6 walk percentage, and a 4.17 ERA and a 3.72 FIP. One of his highlights is a 46.5% ground ball percentage. But we don't know how consistent Sean Dubin can be. He has flashes. I think he definitely is a professional level pitcher, but we're looking for that consistency from Sean Dubin. And if he can't find it this season, he has a lot of people breathing down his neck, as in Forrest Whitley for sure. In minor league baseball last season, Forrest Whitley played 33 games. He only started one. He pitched 34 innings, got a 31.5 strikeout percentage, a little high here with an 11.6 walk percentage, and a nice 55% ground ball percentage with a 2.12 ERA. However, field independent pitching shows a 4.63. So, is this 27-year-old right-handed pitcher finally putting it together? We shall see. Who else is factoring in to try to make a run for this bullpen? Whether it's a middle relief arm or a long relief arm. We have Luis Contreras, who last season, really put together a nice, solid minor league baseball campaign. He played 5 games with the Houston Astros. Kind of didn't really, kind of was just used as a mop-up man, Luis Contreras. But maybe this season, if he can show that he some promise here in spring training, he can make his way onto the roster. We also have Colton Gordon. Colton Gordon played minor league. He played. I got some notifications coming in. I didn't silence. I have Colton Gordon here. He played minor league baseball last season. Had 25 games, but he started 24 of them. So this guy would be more of a long relief option for sure. He has a 23.8% strikeout percentage in that season, a 7.5 walk percentage. So, he's looking to have a good command there, not giving up too many walks. But truly, Colton Gordon, I think, is more of a prospect that's looking to make it into the bullpen for the Astros, as opposed to make it as a starter. But I could be completely off on this and have to eat my words later in the season. We're also looking at Nick Hernandez, the University of Houston pitcher. Last season, he pitched 5 games with the Houston Astros. Once again, kind of like Luis Contreras, he was brought up to be a mop-up guy, so we really didn't get to see too much of what he has. I remember one really good inning he had that just kind of he had one really good inning, I think he came back and pitched like 2/3 of another and had a decent, at least one decent little outing before he ran into some trouble. In the minor leagues, he had a 32.6% strikeout percentage and 2.41 ERA. So Nick Hernandez, we're rooting him on because obviously he's a UH guy, so we like to see that. But also, they're thinking Nick Hernandez, at least on Fangraphs, can be a huge addition to this Astros bullpen, at least in terms of eating some innings, which we're going to need some healthy inning eaters. So he might be one of those guys. He is projected by Fangraphs to pitch 52 games with 52 innings, 23.6 strikeout percentage and 9.2 walk percentage for a 4.36 ERA. So I think we're thinking Nick Hernandez makes this roster. Obviously, me and Fangraphs at perhaps as a middle relief inning eater. We're also looking at Bennett Sousa. So Bennett Sousa has is a 30-year-old left-handed pitcher who played with the White Sox in 2022 and has been injured since his stint with the Houston Astros. So obviously, we're looking to have some lefty arms on the squad this season. Dusty Baker is somewhere shaking his fist that he wanted more lefties. We're finally getting some more lefties. Bennett Sousa is most likely going to make this roster. I think, I don't know enough about him to really say that he could be competing for some of those high leverage innings, but he definitely will be a middle relief inning eater like Nick Hernandez is kind of, those guys are who we're kind of putting at the top of the middle relief, not to be high leverage guys. But we'll see how spring training works and how that shakes out. The last guy here is Rafael Montero. Now, I'm sorry, Astros fans, to bring him up, but Rafael Montero is still on the roster. He was DFA'd, but he was back on the Astros. Here, he spent a lot of time in Sugarland. He actually last season, he pitched 17 games in Sugarland and had a 2.20 ERA. And a 4.14 FIP. His stint in the majors was not so great. He had almost a -1 WAR in 41 games and 38 and 1/3 innings pitched. He had a 14% strikeout rating. Yikes! And an 11.6 walk percentage. So those aren't good numbers. We don't know what Monty's going to give us in this next upcoming season. However, he's on the roster and he is a veteran. He is going to factor in to pitch for the Houston Astros, but we're hoping / needing for this guy to show some flashes of that World Series season in 2022 and show why he got that ridiculous contract. It was because he was once a really great pitcher. It's just being a relief pitcher is volatile, and he, has kind of had a couple tough seasons, and we're hoping for him to bounce back. At least we're rooting for him. We try not to hate too much here. I don't think Monty deserves all that hate. Jim Crane deserves a hate for that contract, not Monty. But let's look really quickly here at the rest of these non-roster invitees. Obviously, I have people like Colton Gordon here with the middle relievers and the long relievers here. There are some pitchers that I have saved for the Starting Pitcher podcast. I kind of had to do that based off of how I think they're going to factor into the Astros roster this upcoming season. So some of these guys might be more starters, but I'm anticipating they'll be used as long relievers or openers or middle relievers, guys like that. But obviously, I could be completely off here. So, we'll see if I have to eat my words. But let's look here at the non-roster invitees. We have Miguel Castro, who played 15 games in Arizona across all levels, and last season, or I don't even have that in my notes, so that could even be his whole career, but he's played 15 games in Arizona across all levels, and none of it looks especially good or worth trying to decipher. Miguel Castro, however, is a 30-year-old vet with 6-year service time with Colorado, New York Mets, New York Yankees, and Arizona. So obviously, 15 games across all levels was just for his time with Arizona. Sorry for that. I should have wrote those notes in a better order so I don't sound foolish, but that's okay. I'm sorry I don't know everything about Miguel Castro, guys. 15 games in Arizona wasn't the best stats, but his FanGraph projections for this upcoming year is that he's going to pitch for 33 games. With a 4.29 ERA. So Miguel Castro, for being a vet, does look to be like one of those arms that Dana Brown will call up at some point. We also have Ray Gaither. He is a 27-year-old right-handed pitcher. He's started some games. He last season in the minors, he's played 51 games, but started 3. He has a 2.98 ERA last season, and 22.5 strikeout percentage, and a little bit higher of a walk percentage there. So we'll see how he factors into the into the season. But he projects to be pretty low down on that potential to be used this season on a 40-man roster. We also have Stephen Okert, who is a 34-year-old veteran left-handed pitcher who also factors to be used at some point this season. Another veteran arm that might not make the initial opening day roster, but probably will factor in for the Astros at some point, much like Miguel Castro. We also have Glenn Otto. Glenn Otto is a 29-year-old right-handed pitcher with major league service time with Texas. Last season in the minor leagues, he played 13 games, and only 13 games, I should say, and 5 of them were for starts. So I feel like he might be kind of a bridge guy. He might be kind of a long relief guy if he is used, but we shall see. And we also have Misiel Tamarez, who is a 25-year-old right-handed pitcher. He played 31 games in the minors last year and started 11 of them. He has a high walk percentage, very high ground ball percentage as well, and very high ERA and FIP, above 6 for this prospect. I think they're giving him a shot, trying to see what he has, building that confidence, but I don't know if he's going to see much playing time for the Houston Astros this upcoming season. We also have Logan Van Way. So this guy is a guy that a lot of people have been talking about as in being a potential arm for the Astros this season. He is a 26-year-old right-handed pitcher with great numbers, but can he have a competitive spring to make his way onto the roster? Because that's truly where it's at. I think he'll find his Van Way to the show at some point this season. I'm just not sure if it's going to be the opening day roster, but I really think he could factor in at some point this season. Last season, he pitched 60 games for 72 2/3 of an inning with a 31.5 strikeout percentage, a 12.9 walk percentage, a 47.3 ground ball percentage for a 3.22 ERA and a 4.29 FIP. Those numbers sound pretty good. We want to get those walk numbers down, of course. But, this guy could be something. So I could see that they use him at some point in the season, but we'll see if he has a good enough spring to make that roster. And the last prospect I have to talk about is Blake Wyman, who is a 29-year-old left-handed pitcher with a low slot, but a quote from the prospects, not from the scouts, I should say, not from me, a quote, surgical breaking ball command, end quote, where he dots his slider wherever he wants and sets up his fastball to sneak up on hitters. And he is a potential lefty specialist because of that low slot angle. He definitely can be easier to see for right-handed pitchers, but this guy, Blake Wyman, looks to be a left-handed specialist. So we'll see. So right now, to kind of recap, if I'm having to give them a depth chart, obviously we're putting Josh Hader at closer. We're putting Brian Abreu as their setup guy. As our secondary setup guy, we're going to put Taylor Scott in there. The middle relievers, we're going to have. I'm going to try. Let's see. Let's try to give them an order here for the depth chart. For the middle relievers, I'm going to have Caleb Ort. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have Caleb Ort, Brian King, Nick Hernandez, Luis Contreras. Then for long relief, I'm honestly going to have we're gonna have Sean Dubin, followed by Forrest Whitley, but I really think Whitley ends up being a higher leveraged or bridge type reliever at some point. And we'll see with Bennett Sousa and Luis Contreras there. I feel like they're going to be battling for some of those last spots there. I think Colton Gordon goes back down to the minors, and a lot of these guys that I mentioned as non-roster invitees battle in the minors and try to make their way to the big show. We're going to take one more break. We got a couple other things to talk about here to wrap up our Astros podcast. We'll be right back. Well, all right, folks. I said we would get to Bregman, and we're finally there. Bregman watch continues, folks. GM Dana Brown said that essentially said that he thinks the discussions are over between Bregman. The offer remains on the table. So I'm guessing what this means is that the Astros are not budging from their offer, which is a pretty good offer for Alex Bregman, but obviously it is not the offer that Bregman and his agent Scott Boras believes he is worth. It looks like, for better or worse, that Bregman might not have a home for spring training. I thought by this time I would have some kind of update as to where Bregman's landing. Right now, we do not know. So I think, as much as it hurts, I do think that Bregman is not going to be an Astro. I think I think that they were hopeful. I think Bregman was hopeful the Astros would meet or get closer to the number that they wanted. But the Astros are hopeful Bregman would just want to come back on a good deal for them. So it doesn't seem like there's any negotiating going on between the Astros and Alex Bregman. Dana Brown basically saying he hasn't even called or he hasn't even talked to Scott Boras recently. So, folks, I think it's time to give up a little bit on that Bregman hope. I'm not saying forever, but I don't know where this guy is going to end up. For a while, I did think it was going to be Detroit. I think they might be the front runners right now. Maybe Detroit as a front runner, Boston and Houston as a secondary option. But I really do not know where Bregman's going to end up, or if he's even going to have a home at the beginning of spring training. It looks like they're in the holding pattern. They're going to hold it out and see who gives him money. But I don't think there are too many people biting to give him more money right now, which could lead to the complicated situation of Bregman not having a home at the beginning of the season, which would be very hard for me to see. I don't want to see that. I want to see Bregman go and be Bregman somewhere else. I don't want him to be playing catch on Instagram trying to get someone to sign him. So we'll see. Hopefully, hopefully, I do think Bregman would be great on the Astros. I think he'd be a great fit. So I don't know. I hope Bregman just calls Scott Boras in the middle of the night and just is like, I was haunted by 3 ghosts. I have to go back to the Astros because they're built for this, I think I just butchered the new catchphrase for the Houston Astros. So let's go ahead and move on to that. I think catchphrase isn't it's the right word. It is it's slogan. No, what's the? Oh my goodness, I'm dying here. But it's the slogan, I guess, a 2025 slogan built for this, which I definitely was on Blue Sky kind of making fun of, making jokes about. But I think a lot of people have been laughing at built for this. The hype video does a lot better of selling it, but when you look at it on paper, it just kind of seems a little silly, a little bland. But there's worse ones to have, folks. But let's see what else we can talk about here. Let's talk about the Billy Wagner getting his number retired. Billy Wagner obviously going to the Hall of Fame, getting his number retired with the Houston Astros, which is going to change Christian Walker's number from 13 to 8 because Christian Walker was going to wear 13. He's now going to be wearing 8. You got to respect your elders. Change that number over. Another big thing that people are excited about is the Astros train. Folks, the Astros train, people are very worried. They weren't seeing it for a while, but it is not dead. It will return in 2025 with a hint of a tribute to the stadium's 25-year-old history. I don't know what that means. We'll have to tune in and find out. Also, in things that people are extremely obsessed about and worried about when there's so many bigger fish to fry right now, there's so many things to worry about or get to use your anger to call your congressman about, but instead we're upset about the Astros train. We're upset about it changing over from Minute Maid to Dyken Park, which happened today. The signage changed, much to the sadness of a lot of nostalgic people. There, once again, folks, I understand it's sad to see something change, but names change, things change all the time. There's real crazy change happening in the world right now. We could pay attention to some of that instead of getting upset about corporate sponsorship. Minute Maid never gave me any money. So I'm gonna be nostalgic, but I'm not gonna miss it. So just little little food for thought there. Did Minute Maid pay you guys too? Is that why you're so torn up about this? Because I didn't get a single check from Minute Maid. Let's also look here. We have the City Connect jerseys, which we're all excited about here at Space Cadet Sports. We're excited about them. We're hoping that they're the rainbow jerseys, the Tequila Sunrise jerseys. That would make me very happy. However, my money, if I had to bet money, I'd say it's probably going to be the brick red and black color motif that they're going with. We will find out on March 31st, before the Giants game. The Astros will reveal those City Connect jerseys, and we will see what the design is, and if we like them better than the Space City jerseys, which, honestly, I mean, I'm Space Cadet. How would I not like the Space City jerseys? I'm really worried because those were fire, in my opinion. I bought one of those. I shouldn't say I bought it. Just to be clear, someone gifted me one of those jerseys, and I wear it because I don't wear too many jerseys, but I wear that one. I think it looks really tight. Really tight. Wow, I'm showing my age here. But yeah, it looks really cool for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about right now. Also, to wrap up here, I was talking about Fangraphs. I talk about how I watch every game, I read every blog, I listen to all the podcasts. I don't listen to all of them, let's be honest. I watch every game at least. I try to read most of the blogs, but listening to all the podcasts would be very difficult. But I'm reading Fangraphs. There's a couple Fangraphs articles that came out this week, and one of them was an interview with Zach DeZenzo. We are talking about Zach DeZenzo in the Infielders episode, how he could potentially find some playing time. Whether or not Bregman's even on the squad, whether he's trying to make a run for a left field position or a corner infield position, Zach DeZenzo, is looking to have a good offensive year. So in the Fangraphs article, he basically is just talking about how he wants to focus on better contact this upcoming season and not just hitting for power. So we're going to watch Zach DeZenzo to see how he does trying to become a better contact hitter. We are all for that. We want the Astros to make better contact. We want the Astros to have better patience. We want them to get better results than the results they had last year offensively. The next Fangraphs article I want to talk about before we wrap up here is the Framber article. There was a great article about Framber Valdez and his use of the cambio. That's right. We all know about the changeup here at Space Cadet Sports. We talked about it extensively last season, and the Astros pitching coaches really helping develop a lot of changeups with the Astros pitchers and relying on that cambio a lot last season, and to great effect. But apparently Fangraphs is just now paying attention to that. They made a huge deal about Framber using the changeup, and it's something that we obviously love talking about. So they put some, you could go check that out to see that I'm not just talking about my emotions. There's stats behind the things I was talking about last season. They put great data to Framber slowly incorporating more changeups into the mix up until last season when it hit a huge spike in usage. And we don't need the numbers to tell us that. From the naked eye, we all saw the uptick in cambios last year. La Grasa sinker, his ground ball masterpiece, isn't even his highest ground ball inducing pitch in his arsenal, with his cutter and his changeup inducing more ground balls than the sinker. And that's kind of nuts to think about, but the facts are there. It's in black and white. The nerds have figured out the math. They're telling us, folks. It's the fact that his changeup's heat map is almost exclusively down and in the corner of the zone is because of that. Whereas a sinker, can sometimes rise for Valdez. Sometimes, and I don't mean that like the four-seamer, the Christian Javier pitch. It isn't an invisible. It doesn't rise like that. What I mean is that the location of his sinker can sometimes be higher than the aim is, and that can spell trouble, especially with the increased velocity that La Grasa has been putting on it recently. And I've been kind of vocal about how I don't like his increased velocity sinker and it doesn't get the best results. However, what the Fangraphs article did that I never really thought about, it put in perspective that if his sinker is a little bit, has more velocity on it, then his changeup can have a higher velocity. So the increased velocity in his sinker does lead to more batted balls because higher velocity gets higher exit velocity, and higher velocity means less control of his pitch, which means that sinker can sometimes float up higher than we really would want it to be. However, because the increased velocity on the sinker, that means an increased velocity on the changeup, which leads to a 90 miles per hour changeup, which is just nasty, as Jack Kay would say. And a harder sinker means a harder cambio, and that cambio is a lot harder to hit when it's that fast. So, folks, I did like that Fangraphs article. I like the stat nerds putting some hard facts over the emotions that I'm always talking to y'all about. But yeah, go check out that article and let me know what you think. And that's going to do it for this transmission, Space Cadets. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you so much. I really can't thank the listeners enough. It really has been nice to have increased listenership. We are a small podcast. So please, if you've gotten this far, please like, please rate, review, subscribe, share, kick it, bop it, pull it, smash all of those buttons for me. It really does help us a lot here. If you'd be so kind, also check out our Substack, which is available at spacecadetsports.substack.com. You can put your email into that field there. You get every article, every podcast, every meme post emailed to you directly for free. Or if you're like me, you can get the app. Download the Substack app, search Space Cadet Sports. You see that orange astronaut pop up. You know that's me. Hit that you want notifications instead of emails, and you get phone notifications instead of emails for every post, every article, every meme dump and podcast instead. And once again, that is for free. If you'd like to be so kind to be a paid subscriber, it really does help. You can get treats for Carla here if you'd like. She heard the T word, her ears popped up. Or if you just want to let me know what you think the City Connect jerseys will be, you can do that too. Reach out on social media at spacecadetsports.bsky.social or Space Cadet Sports on Instagram and Threads. Or you can call in at speakpipe.com/Space Cadet Sports and leave us a voicemail if it isn't too crazy or profane. It might even make the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, folks. I really appreciate you. Check out Sunday Morning Pre-Recorded, my other podcast, if you'd be so kind as well. I appreciate all of y'all out there in podcast land. We have another spring training preview coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. Remember to be the best that you can be. Keep your head up, kid. And as always, vamos Astros.